This week on the PRESSURECAST, Nintendo announces the SNES Classic, Mass Effect DLC gets scrapped, and Sony pulls a shady game from PlayStation Network. It's Monday, July 3rd, 2017. Everything happening in the world of video games is here, now, on the PRESSURECAST. Hey, Pressure Pals, welcome to the 188th episode of the PRESSURECAST. Video Games Are Dumb.com's weekly news panic that posts on a bunch of podcast services and YouTube. If you want to contact the PRESSURECAST and have your question, comment, or concern read on air, it's easy. You just gotta read the description of this podcast app or of this YouTube page. You'll find all the links from Twitter to email to a phone number that you can text or call. Really simple. Go ahead and do that, please. Man, we have a lot to get to this week. We're going to be talking about all the games that are in the SNES Classic. We're going to be talking about some really strange business developments going on over on the PlayStation Network. And we're going to wrap it up by talking about all the events that happened 10 years ago and beyond in strong history. Tons of stuff to get to. What an exciting episode. I'm excited. You're excited. Fantastic. I've got to say, I've had an incredibly odd week. This week has been strange, to say the least. Probably because every single day I keep walking into a scenario that I've never had to deal with before. Like a scenario that is alien to me, that is strange, that puts me in a position to kind of weigh out the pros and cons rather than just sort of naturally react to something. And I will give you an example of exactly what happened to me yesterday. So I'm driving down the street, driving in the car. You're there with me. You're in the passenger seat. Hey, how's it going? Oh, not bad. Did you see that new movie? That movie was pretty good. Here we go. We're having a fun little time, aren't we? I'm driving down the street. I pull up to this kind of like divided, highway, it's a divided highway, and I'm about to merge onto it, and I look over and I just see, I see like this thing, like this little dome, and it kind of looks like the top of like an icy cup or a Slurpee cup, stuff you put on the drinks that you get over at the gas station. I'm like, what the fuck is that? It looks dark. It looks darker. I'm like, oh, is that a toy? Is that like a toy? Is that like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toy? What is that? Like, what exactly is it? I can't take my eyes off of it. Now, I'm on a side street, right? So like no one's behind me, so I can kind of take my time and look. And I keep squinting, and I'm like, I gotta see what the fuck this thing is. I don't know why. It was something so unusual. I started thinking like, it looks like a turtle. Now I've never seen a turtle in person, or at least I don't recall seeing a turtle actually in person in the wild. There are no wild turtles around here. I've never had a pet turtle or anything like that. I don't know what this turtle is. So I put on the flashers. I get out of the car. I walk up, and sure as shit, it is a turtle. And it just immediately looks at me, and then the arms and the legs and the head just go back into the shell. And I'm like, that's adorable. I didn't know they could actually do that. I knew they could do that, but I didn't know it was like that. It was like fast. I'm like, whoa. All right. And I'm looking around, I'm like, what do I do? What do I do here? It's just some random turtle, and it's going to get crushed. And I don't want to pick it up because it's probably covered in germs or something. So I'm like, all right. And I'm not OCD or anything. I really am not, But I was just like, I don't want to pick up a random reptile. I just don't. That's not, especially because I just don't deal with reptiles on a day-to-day basis. I don't know what they're covered in. It doesn't matter. Either way, so I start like kind of poking at it with my shoe, and it'll pop up and then try and scurry away like really slowly. And then I'll go back in. And I'm thinking to myself, like, whose is this? Is this somebody's? Is this their pet turtle? How is that possible? How does one lose a pet turtle? They are incredibly slow. Look at this thing. It can't even cross the street in less than like 5 minutes. And I mean, time is going on. Like, time is just, I don't know what to do at this point. And then some dude who's at like a liquor store across the divided, street, he just starts yelling at me. He's like, hey, you want me to get one of these guys? You want me to get one of these guys? I'm like, what? I'm yelling back. I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, I got one of these guys. Take care of it. Like, take care of what? And I'm saying that because I'm thinking like, do you even know what's going on here? What are your guys going to take care of? Your guys or just random guys at the liquor store? Like, is this guy actually someone that works there, or is he just like some weird drunk? Like, who is this guy? He's like, oh no, there's some guys in here. They'll take care of it. And so, first of all, he sounds like a psycho, but I'm a psycho too. I'm a complete psychopath because I start thinking in my head, is he just talking shit? Is he just saying like, you're too much of a wimp to pick up the turtle? You're too much of a wimp to pick up that turtle? I got some real guys in here. They'll take care of that turtle like nothing, man. They can take care of that turtle. So I start getting like an inferiority complex. I'm like, motherfucker, I'm going to pick up this turtle. And so I do. I like reach over and I pick it up. And it is just, you gotta understand, I just don't interact with turtles. I just don't. And it is just creepy. Like, it went inside of its shell, and you just feel like the rumbling of whatever's going on inside of there. It's like, I don't like this. I don't want to. So I put it down in some grass. It pops out. It looks at me, and then it goes back in its shell. At least it's out of the road. And I just kind of went away, and it was like, what the fuck was that about? What a weird fucking situation. Now, I didn't have to involve myself. I understand that, but I just couldn't let the thing get crushed. I didn't have to become so emotionally invested in this situation, but it was just like, I want to see a turtle get hit by a semi-truck or something. I don't know what's going to happen. That sounds terrible. This little thing's lost. And I assume it's not a pet. I hope it's not. Otherwise, I really fucked up. But I don't know. It was weird. Stuck with me. Anyway, this is a video game podcast, if you haven't figured that out yet. And we're going to be talking all about video games as soon as I can. What was that? Did you guys hear that? I swear I heard something. Doot, doot. Oh, that's right. It's the Hype Train. Feel the PR vibrations as we barrel towards Video Game Satisfaction Station on the Hype Train. This is the part of the show where we talk all about those upcoming video games and events to get you hyped up to spend all your money and become a video game guru. And we're going to start off by talking about the SNES Classic because, of course, following the smash success of last year's NES Classic, Nintendo announced its follow-up, the SNES Classic Edition, and that's going to be launching on September 29th. It's going to cost $80, and if you're keeping track at home, that's $20 more than the NES Classic. Now, it's worth noting that you're only going to get 21 games in this package as opposed to the 30 games you got on the NES Classic. However, the SNES Classic will have 2 controllers as opposed to 1. So you lose some things and you gain some things. It's all right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think about the general idea of the SNES Classic and why Nintendo is doing that. But before we do, we've got 21 games to talk about, and I want to do that right now. Let's start off and go through alphabetically with Contra 3, The Alien Wars. Now, I'll be honest, this is not my favorite entry in the Contra series. I was always a bigger fan of what they did on the NES, like the classic, original Contra, super great game, or what they did in the 16-bit era on the Genesis, like Hardcore. If you've not played Hardcore, it's got 4 playable characters. It's way better than Alien Wars. That being said, Alien Wars is okay. It's okay. It's not a bad game. It does have the familiar Contra action that everybody loves. The problem is that they put these top-down stages. Like, around this time, Konami, for whatever reason, was like, oh, we need to have a top-down stage in every Contra game. They did the same thing with the PlayStation 1 versions, and they were never, ever, ever, ever any good. Like, it's cool that it shows off all those Mode 7 graphics from the Super Nintendo, but if they cut out those stages, I'd probably like this game a little bit more. But what are you going to do? Anyway, let's move on to Donkey Kong Country. That's the second game on the list here. So we're now at number 2. All right, great. And 19 more to go. Excellent. The weirdest thing about Donkey Kong Country being on this list is it's the only Donkey Kong Country game on this list. That's right, there's no Donkey Kong Country 2 or 3, which is weird. Like, I get it. I get it that they're trying to maintain the idea that video games cost money, right? This package costs $80 and you're going to get 21 games because they want to communicate to you that these classic games still have value in 2017. I get that. But you really couldn't throw in the 2 other sequels? Like, I know it's not a memory constraint. Like, you definitely could fit in more games. It's not just limited to, 21. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Just on its own, Donkey Kong Country is one of the most iconic games of the 16-bit era. It's brutally difficult, and it has an awesome soundtrack. So, and also it just belongs on here. I think it's one of the last major games on the Super Nintendo. Definitely one of the last major ones. No, I'm probably getting that wrong. Was it 94? I think Super Nintendo, this was 94. I can't remember. Anyway, up next, number 3 is Earthbound. Well. Nintendo's emulating Earthbound for the second time in 4 years? I have a theory that they are trying to work their way to Mother 3. But they are just, I don't know why they haven't done it already. I assume that it's going to get released on the Switch. I assume maybe what we'll get is some sort of, Earthbound collection on the Switch, maybe something like that, because it just seems weird that they keep trying to revitalize Earthbound in the States, because they re-released Earthbound 0 on the Wii U Virtual Console, which was a game that never came to America before, and then they released Earthbound on the Wii U Virtual Console, and now they're putting it on the SNES Classic, which is hilarious because no one really played Earthbound when it was released back then. A lot of people look back at it fondly today, but it sold terribly back then, absolutely terribly, which was weird because it had a lot of things going for it. It was about, kids in the modern age, and its box was humongous, but JRPGs just weren't popular enough, so it never really got picked up. And I'll be honest, I like Earthbound. I appreciate Earthbound, at least from afar. I've never actually completed Earthbound, but I've enjoyed what I've played. I've tried to play Earthbound so many different times. I remember playing it on a PowerPC Macintosh in the late 90s, emulating it. So yeah, I always try and sit down and plow my way through it, but around 3 hours in, you know, just something distracts me. I don't know. I'm a bad person. Just a bad person. Anyway, moving on. Number 4, Final Fantasy III. One of the greatest games of all time, bar none. And in case you don't know, Final Fantasy III is actually Final Fantasy VI. They just didn't release half of the games in the United States, so they had to call it Final Fantasy III. And then when they released Final Fantasy VII, they called it Final Fantasy VII here in the States because they're like, this is getting way too confusing. But if you've not played Final Fantasy III, it holds up remarkably well. We're just going to call it Final Fantasy VI, just because it makes more sense. It holds up really well. It's got a lot of things that most sprite-based JRPGs never had and still don't. It's got, you know, a lot of political intrigue. It's got mech robots. It's got a villain that you can actually hate. Like a villain that you actually want to be like, oh, I want to show him who's boss. Like it really riles you up. It even has a musical number. It's a masterpiece. It's just awesome. And it's funny because I was talking to a buddy of mine, I want to say about a year ago, and he was talking about playing Final Fantasy VI again. He was replaying it on emulator, and he was enjoying it, but every once in a while, you know, one of the characters will laugh, and they have like, you know, digital voices that are like weird synthesizers. And he's like, oh man, I don't know if this game holds up for new players. I was like, of course it does. It absolutely does. Because, you know, like when you watch, you ever see the movie Goodnight or Goodnight and Good Luck? You know, the George Clooney movie, or the Christopher Nolan movie called The Following. Like, there's a lot of movies out there that are still released that are in black and white. And when you sit down and you watch a black and white movie, you don't sit there the whole time being like, I wish there was color. Like, you just get used to it because you get wrapped up in the story. I feel like that's the way it works with a lot of these old school JRPGs. If they have a fantastic story, you're still going to become emotionally invested. And before you know it, you know, the big moments are still going to hit you hard. It's awesome. So Final Fantasy VI, awesome game. So happy it's included. It really is a masterpiece. Up next, number 5, we have F-Zero, which is fine. I'm just not convinced that it plays as well as people think they remember. I mean, F-Zero is a very pretty game and has lots of Mode 7 graphics, which is cool, and it's really fast. But I remember in 2009 when the iPhone was starting to gain some traction in the App Store, there were a lot of games that just ripped off F-Zero because it was such a simple concept, just fast and then you turn, fast and turning, and that was about it. I would even say that things F-Zero only improved as time went on, like on the GameCube version, or that Fast Racing Neo, the spiritual successor, I guess you could call it. But whatever, I know most people are going to disagree with me because they still love F-Zero. But I will admit that yes, it belongs in this package. Not everything in the SNES Classic has to be a great game that holds up against the test of time. Sometimes it's more important to just have things that are representative or important to the SNES history. And certainly, you know, F-Zero is that. So even if I'm not a big fan, it was a mandatory inclusion. Number 6, I don't really have to keep numbering these, do I? Whatever. Number 6 is Kirby Superstar. And holy crap, Kirby Superstars is one of the best Super Nintendo games of all time. If you are a Kirby fan, likely it's because you played Kirby Superstar or the Game Boy or the NES games. Like everything after that, I feel like just never holds up quite as well as I like. But this game right here might be the best Kirby game ever. It's a toss-up between Dreamland 2 on the Game Boy and Kirby Superstars. As long as we're talking about like the main Kirby gameplay where he absorbs powers and whatnot. But Kirby Superstars is basically a collection of mini games. They don't just have one story, they have 8 separate events that you compete in. And unlike other games where, you know, it starts off kind of slow and then it works its way up and then you hit the ground running. No. Kirby Superstars, you hit that button and you are doing shit. Like, it is the apocalypse. That is what's going on every single time you start a brand new level. Like, oh shit, we are really going after Meta Knight. He's in an airship. We're gonna fight all these guys. There is chaos in the sky. It is awesome. Also, there's a ton of cool mini games. There's like the samurai one where it says go and then you have to hit a button as fast as possible. First person to hit the button wins, but if you hit the button too early, you lose. Really simple game, but totally fun for multiplayer. Also a board breaking game where you have to tap the button as fast as you can, and, you know, eventually Kirby will crack the earth in half with a karate chop. If that sounds like a fever dream, it really is. Kirby Superstars is magic, and I love it so much, and you should too. Up next, number 7, another Kirby game, Kirby's Dream Course. Now, this is basically a golf game, except the ball is Kirby, and you just knock him around these abstract places. these abstract worlds. I guess the closest thing you could sort of compare it to visually would be something like Marble Madness, you know, abstract, isometric, ball physics. The ball physics in this game are fantastic. Now, if you go in just to play the game exactly how it is, you might not enjoy it as much, but if you go in there trying to get a high score, you gotta treat it like kind of an old school arcade game where you're like, no, I'm gonna sink Kirby into that hole and or maybe it's not even a hole, maybe he just grabs a flag, I don't really remember, but I'm gonna get Kirby in there in 2 shots, especially if you have a buddy and you're gonna play like a game of horse, like, no, I can get Kirby in there in 2 shots, can you? Awesome game, you'll have so much fun, great music, Kirby is super adorable, and like I said, the physics are remarkable for the time, and I don't know, I can't say enough good things about that. Even if you're not a fan of Kirby, you gotta check that out, because it's only tangentially related to the Kirby canon. Is this golf game in canon? Up next, number 8, are we at 8? I don't really remember, is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I feel like this game gets enough praise already, so I'll just say yes, it's very good, it was a mandatory inclusion. If you've not played Link to the Past, you must. Okay, great. Got that covered. Up next is Mega Man X, and I hate to come off like a contrarian, but Mega Man X never really did it for me. Maybe it's because there were so many Mega Man games back on the NES that when they announced Mega Man X, even though it was like new, it was like, we kind of just did this. In fact, I think Mega Man 6 came out the same year as Mega Man X, 1993? I want to say it was 93. For me, Mega Man X, beyond the first stage where you're fighting all those robots on the freeway, the rest of it's kind of boring. But yes, it's iconic. It belongs on the list. Up next, there is Secret of Mana. And I know this one just makes a lot of people happy because it's basically an action JRPG that was made right when Squaresoft hit its stride on the Super Nintendo. Like the best graphics, the best sound, like the tightest gameplay. Secret of Mana is awesome. But here's why it's so cool in 2016 is unlike most JRPGs or most action JRPGs, it has multiplayer. You could play up to 3 players, actually, on that, not just 2 players. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to connect another controller to the SNES Classic or not. But, you know, it's funny. I was reading up on, Secret of Mana because I thought it was sort of like a niche game. You know, I was like, oh, wow, that's weird that they include this. Must be something have something to do with, Square Enix, some sort of deal. That's why they had to include it. But I looked it up. It sold over 500,000 copies in 1993. Which is bonkers. That is huge. If you adjust for inflation, how much money they made off of that, it's huge. It's huge. There's a reason Squaresoft was one of the biggest video game companies of the 90s. So let's go over to probably the most significant inclusions, I would say, in this entire bundle, and that is Star Fox and Star Fox 2. And it's kind of funny because last week, of course, was the 20th anniversary of Star Fox 64. So over in the Strong History segment, I talked all about why Star Fox 64 exists and what happened to Star Fox 2. In case you don't know, the reason this is a big deal being put into the SNES Classic is because Star Fox 2 was never released. It was finished, pretty much finished. In fact, there's a 90 to 95% completed ROM that's already been on the internet for years and years, so you can actually play Star Fox 2, or you could over the past few years. But when they found out that the 64 was going to be a little bit late, or I forget exactly what happened, they decided to just cancel the entire game. They did not want Star Fox competing with the Nintendo 64, and so they just migrated everything to a brand new console, and that's the whole story. Now, I'll be the first to say, Nintendo, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for releasing Star Fox 2. It's not often that we get a canceled 20-year-old title rising from the grave, though now that I say that, they did that with Earthbound Zero, like we were talking about earlier, so whatever. But from a preservation standpoint, this is beautiful, especially because a lot of the ideas from Star Fox Zero eventually were introduced in Star Fox, or not Star Fox Zero, that's where I'm getting to. Star Fox 2 actually had a lot of ideas that were never used until Star Fox Zero, like the chicken walker, where the R-Wing can turn into a walking vehicle. That is my walking motion, okay? That being said, here's the thing. Here's the thing I'm kind of worried about. These games don't hold up in the slightest. Now, I've been going through this entire list and being like, that game's not as good as some other games, or, that game's really simple. Star Fox just doesn't play right in 2017. It looks like an animated GIF that is just stuttering on bad internet. Like, Star Fox 2, it's likely going to be the exact same thing, because what they did is they used the FX chip to sort of brute force 3D technology onto the SNES, and it looks like a nightmare. It looks like vaporwave graphics. It is something else. But what I'm worried about is that, the FX chip was actually kind of difficult to emulate, and that was the reason why they didn't have things like Yoshi's Island, which used the FX2 chip, I want to say, or Star Fox being released on like the Wii U. I think they released Star Fox on the Wii eventually, but apparently it wasn't a great port. So hopefully they figured out a way to make the FX chip emulate properly. It took a long time for even, I guess you would call them illegal emulators, to figure out how to do that. Here's the thing I want to make very, very clear. I'm not a prude. We were just talking about Final Fantasy 3. We're just talking about how, you play a game long enough, you just adapt to it. You get used to it. I love PlayStation 1 games. Those are horrible looking 3D games. They're all jaggy and whatnot. But the thing is, Star Fox never played good to begin with. It was never a good game. People always like to pretend it was, or they think it was. It was not. When they released Star Fox 64, I think they fully realized their vision, and it was just a far better experience. I will defend Star Fox 64 to the death. Maybe not that extreme, but I will defend it. But the original Star Fox games? I don't think so, man. I don't think they hold up anyway. Anyway, let's go to the next one. Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting. Seriously, this is one of the best games of all time. And I'm not just saying that from nostalgia. I actually didn't really get into Street Fighter 2 until 2007. I want to explain. Hear me out. That's only 10 years ago. Hear me out. Me and a buddy were playing a lot of emulators, and we actually had controllers and whatnot. And he's like, let's play some Street Fighter 2. And I'm like, shit, yeah, I played tons of Street Fighter 2. I'm gonna whoop your ass. He crushed me. He crushed me like it was nothing. And I had that moment where I realized, oh God, I have thought that I knew how to play fighting games for like all of my life. And it turns out, no, I was just playing against scrubs. I don't even have a clue about what I'm doing. I don't know how to properly block. I don't know how to do the dragon punch. I'm pathetic. I'm absolutely pathetic. The best I got is the sliding M. Bison kick. And even this guy's working around that. So I actually sat there and I properly learned how to play Street Fighter 2. And because of that, I actually got pretty good at fighting games. If you want to get good at fighting games and you're not sure where to start, this is a great place. Street Fighter 2, still a fantastic game. It is the cornerstone of everything that we have when it comes to fighting games today. All right, up next we have another Konami classic, Super Castlevania 4. And I'll be honest, it took me, I didn't love Super Castlevania 4 for a very, very long time because I'm a huge Castlevania fan. I love Castlevania 1. I've actually learned to love Castlevania 2. Castlevania 3, the Japanese version with the soundtrack, oh, it's so good. Symphony of the Night, oh, you're killing me, I love it. Oh my god, those DS and Game Boy Advance games, I love Castlevania, I really do. Bloodlines on the Genesis, you're talking my language. Castlevania Chronicles on the PlayStation 1, ooh, baby, I love it. But Super Castlevania, it doesn't really feel like a Castlevania game because it's got like 8-way directional attacks and it feels more like Contra and not so much Castlevania, so I didn't like it at first. But as time went on and I played it more and more, I really learned to appreciate it and just take it for what it is, especially because almost every single stage has its own gimmick. It's kind of like Super Mario 3D Land or a lot of those Super Mario games where it always introduces these weird things that don't repeat themselves in other stages. Plus it has a ton of Mode 7 graphics that look super cool and are very representative of the Super Nintendo. It's got like heavy metal gothic aesthetics and the music is just fucking incredible. I love the music in this game. But I have a couple of complaints still. Of course I have a couple of complaints. I really do prefer the Japanese version of this game compared to the American version. There's a few differences in terms of gameplay, and especially if you're a speedrunner, you prefer the Japanese version because there's a few like glitches you can work your way through. But it comes right down to it, I gotta go with the Japanese version because there's more blood and there's more crosses. And if you're fighting vampires, there should be blood, right? That's what I'm saying. Up next we have Super Ghouls and Ghosts, which holy shit, please no, thank you. I do not like Super Ghouls and Ghosts. I love the original NES Ghouls and Ghosts. It has aged kind of weirdly, but I love the original Super Ghouls and Ghosts, but the Super Nintendo version, no thank you. I would like the NES version. I do not like Ghouls and Ghosts on the SNES. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, not a good game. You will not like it if you play it. Do not play the Game Boy Advance port either. That one is even worse somehow. True story. And then we have Super Mario Kart. Look, this is another classic. There's not much to say. Like F-Zero, it's super simple, but I still like the original Mario Kart. It's just, you know, it's iconic. You gotta include it. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars is next, and I think it's so funny that they've included this game because it's basically them saying, hey, remember when there were other Mario RPGs? Remember the original Mario RPG before Squaresoft left and went over to Sony and we just had to start making our own? Like, if you were a fan of Thousand Year Door or Bowser's Inside Story, the Mario and Luigi or the Paper Mario series, and you've not played the original, Super Mario RPG, You've got to play this. It's so good. It's so good. Some people think it's even better than those games. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but it's damn good. And it has its own cool isometric graphical style that kind of makes it look like everything's made of claymation. I love it. Super Mario RPG, awesome game. Really fun combat system, too. Super Mario World is up next. This is a slam dunk. This is an obvious one. But I think it's kind of strange. You know, when I hear about the greatest games of all time, people talk about, you know, Super Mario 64, when they talk about the best Mario game, and I think that has a lot to do with people just kind of aging up, you know, like the kids of the 64 era now are aging up. But if you ask me, I think Super Mario World is better than 64. There's so many secrets, so much fun. I love just how every stage has its own vibe. And if you grew up in the 90s, you know Mario 64. And I know this phrase gets thrown around a lot, but, you know, like 90s kids love this shit. I'm not trying to be funny. 90s kids love this shit. But I have one slight nitpick, because of course I do. It would have been really nice if they had, you know, Mario World plus Mario All-Stars, which was the bundle that also had Mario 1, 2, and 3 in their updated version, you know, but they probably won't do that because it was on the NES Classic last year, you know, the Classic 1, 2, and 3. But hey, you know, Nintendo, some of us didn't get our hands on NES Classic, so that would have been nice. Up next we have Super Metroid, which is one of the greatest games of all time, like this and Symphony of the Night, which, you know, huge Castlevania fan. This right here is what cemented the concept of a Metroidvania, and this game is so good. Super Metroid is so good, it basically convinced a lot of people out there to stop what they were doing and go learn game design and programming and start making games. That's why there's so many Metroidvanias out there today, is because Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid were so fucking good. It's life-altering, literally. I'm not sure what else you could say about it. Okay, up next we have probably my favorite game in the entire bundle, Super Punch-Out. I love Super Punch-Out. I love Super Punch-Out so fucking much. I was obsessed with this game for like a year straight, and I didn't look up strategy guides. Oh no, I wanted to break the game all by myself. I loved Super Punch-Out so much that I remember I was looking up Dreamcast emulation back in the early 2000s. And in case you don't know, Dreamcast emulation was where you burned a disc of ROMs with an emulator and played on your Dreamcast. You could play like Super Nintendo, NES, games on the Dreamcast. Anything beyond that was a bit too complex. But man, I remember looking it up and being like, oh, I want to play so many games on my Dreamcast, but then realizing how complicated it was for me. I didn't know what I was doing about or how to burn ISO, so I was like, I'm not going to bother. Never mind. That's too complicated. You know, why do I even want to play these games on my Dreamcast? I can just play them on my computer. Big deal. Left the room, got something to eat, and then I remembered that Super Punch-Out exists. I went back, and within an hour, I learned exactly what I needed to do. I burned the games onto the disc, just Super Punch-Out, and I played it on my Sega Dreamcast. I learned how to do something because of Super Punch-Out. Super Punch-Out motivates me. I love that game. And lastly, we have Yoshi's Island, which is the only good Yoshi game. It's true. I actually like it. It's a fun game. I don't like Yoshi games, but I like Yoshi's Island. It's really easy if you're a kid. You know, it's just a little bit of fun, but, you know, if you're a little bit more serious-minded, you can actually do some pretty cool tricks with throwing the eggs, so it's cool if you practice. Weirdly enough, though, I really prefer the soundtrack on the Game Boy Advance version of the game, but I prefer playing the Super Nintendo version of the game. So if someone could do like a ROM hack where I can get the Game Boy Advance soundtrack on there, that'd be awesome. Please do that. Kisses. Okay. So that's the entire game list. But of course, America is only one half of the equation. Japan is getting their own version with most of the same games. However, there's going to be a few that are taken away for Japan, and they're getting some different titles. The Super Famicom will include Tetris Attack, really good game. Kind of wish we got that one. Super Formation Soccer and Fire Emblem, Mystery of the Emblem, as well as Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers, and Mystical Ninja, which is a really fun, like, top-down beat-em-up. They got some games that are just better than the American versions, but all in all, it's a good list either way. They're not getting Super Punch-Out, so I guess, you know, we won out in the long run. Nintendo has also announced that they will have more SNES Classics to ship this year than they did with the NES Classic last year, but they also said this product is for this year only. So, as for the announcement, I'm a little bit conflicted. Like, the overall package of, or just the existence of a SNES Classic, I'm a little bit conflicted here. See, Nintendo is trying to ship out as many Switch consoles as possible right now, right? You know what I mean? I know I feel like I'm jumping off course a little bit, but just hear me out. So they're trying to ship out as many Switch consoles as possible, right? But they're having trouble keeping up with demand right now, right? And now some people are accusing them of artificially inflating the demand of the Nintendo Switch, which, by all accounts, is an unfair accusation. But what does it say about your company when you immediately go out year after year and start creating artificial demand for these classic systems? Do you know what I mean? Like, Nintendo seems to understand what they're doing with the Switch. We're like, we're trying our best to keep up with demand. But then when it comes to like the NES Classic or the SNES Classic, they just telegraph like, oh, by the way, we're not going to have enough. Just so you know, we're not going to have enough. Why? Why? I don't understand that. Nintendo must realize that they're just going to create a scalper's market by doing this. And that's really my biggest issue with this, is that they're trying to make something feel special, but this isn't special. This is bullshit. There's no reason a gigantic company like Nintendo can't put out a few more SNES Classics. Like, I guarantee you, they will sell through almost all of them. Like, once you sell out, maybe put out some feelers and then manufacture more. They should have done it with the NES Classic. The NES Classic should not have wrapped up at the end of 2000 and, or I guess, it was April that they ended production on that. That just doesn't make any sense. Also, I'm a little bit worried about Star Fox 2. Not because of the quality, because it's an old game, it is what it is, but I'm worried that they're never going to release it outside of the SNES Classic, which would be such a dick move in terms of preservation and the way that people experience games, especially on a hard-to-find, retro mini console. So for whatever reason, I'm sure they think that this is going to be like helpful, that this is a good idea, that this is gonna spur sales, but it's just going to be a scalper's market over and over again. Hopefully someone buys the SNES Classic and just rips the ROM files so that they can put them online. But I've seen a lot of people online saying, okay, so what's going to happen next? Are they going to do a Nintendo 64 Mini? Are they going to do a Virtual Boy Mini? Are they going to do a GameCube Mini? And honestly, I don't think they're going to do anything. I think this is it for a long while. Seriously. Nintendo is targeting nostalgia, a very specific type of nostalgia that has disposable income. And I think they're going to wait a few years before they move on to the next nostalgia product, whatever it might be. If anything, I think these mini consoles exist just to sell more Nintendo Switches, which I realize sounds crazy because, of course, the Nintendo Switch is like a runaway success right now, but hear me out. Well, it's not a runaway success, whatever. We'll come back to that later in the show. The concept of Nintendo's, philosophy over the past few years has been about simplicity, trying to get everyone engaged with video games. Like when they released the Nintendo Wii, they tried to make sure that they simplified the controller. They just wanted to be like a remote control, get rid of all the intimidation factor. It's just a stick with a couple of buttons. Well, 10 years later, that's not really an issue anymore. Casual players have sort of adapted to the complexity of video games. And if they want casual games, they'll probably play them on their phone. If anything, I think like these NES Classics and SNES Classics are trying to reintroduce the controller to some people. Like trying to remind them that there was a time and a place where they used a controller on a weekly or daily basis and, kind of nudge them and be like, hey, if you were going to be okay with playing a controller here, why don't you get yourself a Nintendo Switch? You know what you're doing on there. Come on. Go get one of our new consoles. That's just my idea, though. And also, they're probably just making this because it makes a lot of goddamn money. But yeah, I wouldn't expect another console anytime soon. So, hopefully you can get an SNES Classic if this is kind of your thing, or enjoy spending $500 or $1,000 on eBay. Ooh, or be ready to beat up some old people online at Best Buy or Target or wherever the fuck you go. The free market. Yay. Toot toot. We have one more Nintendo story, so we might as well burn it right now. Bandai Namco has announced yet another Namco Museum Classic compilation will be coming to the Nintendo Switch on July 28th, and it will cost $30. Now, this will include 11 arcade hits such as Dig Dug, Galaga, Galaga 88, Pac-Man, Rolling Thunder 2, Sky Kid, and The World of Tomorrow. No, that's not true. It's just Sky Kid, Splatterhouse, Tank Force, and the Tower of Duraga. But perhaps the most exciting part of this entire package is the 2003 GameCube title, Pac-Man Vs., which will also be packed in. Okay, I understand that you're probably like, why does this story matter? That sounds dumb. You really think that sounds dumb? Alright, hypothetical person, well listen to me. Pac-Man Vs. is one of the best games you've never played. It's a multiplayer game where you and 3 other buddies play around a Pac-Man where one person plays as Pac-Man in the traditional top-down view, so it looks just like the classic Pac-Man game, but the 3 other buddies, they play as the ghosts. And it's in a third-person, fully 3D game. Like, it's a third-person game where they're just walking around this maze trying to find Pac-Man, but the walls are really high. It's super cool. You actually have to work together to stop Pac-Man, and Pac-Man has to eat all the power pellets, and then you pass the controller around, and everybody gets a go at being Pac-Man. It's super cool. I mean, in an ideal scenario, if you're just gonna be the person that plays Pac-Man all day, you're a dick. Share the controller. Now, back then you used the Game Boy Advance connector and 3 GameCube controllers, but now you're actually gonna need 2 Nintendo Switches, one of which for Pac-Man and the other one for the Ghosts. Now, hopefully, this doesn't mean you have to buy 2 copies of Namco Museum, or better yet, it'd be really nice if they included online play. Wouldn't that be nice, Namco? If you included online play for this game? For once in your miserable lives, do something right? I don't know why I'm coming down so hard on Namco. But if not, if you need 2 copies, it's not the worst thing in the world because there's a lot of good games on here. Rolling Thunder's on there. That game is dope. Toot toot. Last month's E3 presentation included Sony's announcement of a remake of the classic game Shadow of the Colossus. It is a full ground-up remake of the PlayStation 2 title. While it has been confirmed that the celebrated Porthouse Bluepoint will be taking on the project, it was unclear how involved the original director Fumito Ueda is involved. Wait, I said that wrong. Doesn't matter. Fumito Ueda, is he involved in the game? Well, we finally know because he spoke with Eurogamer and he said he won't have a direct hand in the project, but he actually has been in contact with Bluepoint Games, giving them tips on changes he would like to see. Quote, I transmitted my petition about the content and turning, but I don't know the implementation will be what I told them. Okay, he's speaking through a translator, so it's kind of choppy English here. Though those things of the remake that I would like to change, I cannot mention, because if I say one thing and in the final version the thing is not included, it's a problem. Long story short, he's basically saying, I can't tell you what I told Bluepoint because if they don't take my ideas, then you're gonna, look at the game and be like, oh, they should have listened to him or whatever. So he's not going to mention it, which good for him. That's really nice of him to do that because he's trying not to screw over some other development house. But as much as I'd like to see Ueda's ideas implemented in this remake, I highly doubt they will be because Bluepoint, one of the best studios currently running, they're fantastic, but they don't make creative choices. They just don't. Usually a publisher will hand Bluepoint a project and say exactly what they want. In the case of something like Titanfall 2, the original Titanfall, we want Titanfall running on the Xbox 360, or we want Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 running on the 360 and the PlayStation 3 and the Vita. That's all they do is they just port the games. They're told exactly what to do and they make it look as good as possible. And usually it does look good. It looks fantastic and it plays fantastic too. But considering that Ueda is not part of Sony, he's obviously not paying Bluepoint. This is a Sony project, not a Ueda project. Not to mention that Shuhei Yoshida already said the game will be mostly identical outside of the visual enhancements. I'm going to assume most of Ueda's ideas are going to be left on the scrap heap, which is, sad. What are we going to do? Toot toot. We have our list of PlayStation Plus free games for the month of July. Here they are. On the PlayStation 4 in July, for free, you're going to get Don't Die, Mr. Robot, which is also coming to the Vita for free. Obviously, you pay for PlayStation Plus, but you know what I mean. Do not leave that fucking comment below. Don't you send me an email being like, oh, you got to play for PlayStation Plus, those games aren't free. Those games are free, damn it. Anyway, on the PlayStation 4, you're going to get Don't Die, Mr. Robot, which is sort of a top-down shooter, except you don't shoot anybody, and your goal is to basically fill the screen with enemies and then blow them up all at once. It's a neat little concept. It looks cool. I'll be honest, though, the graphics and the sound, they look really cheap. I'm not a graphics snob. I'm just saying, this looks like a Flash game. I'm one of those, kids websites, like kidzone.biz. Play Don't Die, Mr. Robot. But, I mean, the concept is cool. Also on the PlayStation 4, you'll get the Telltale game, Game of Thrones. I actually played this when it came out. I think the first 2 episodes is what I played. It's just another Telltale game. I don't really like it because I don't really like fantasy and I'm not really familiar with Game of Thrones, but I have friends that are and they really liked this Telltale game, so it's got that going for it. Up next, on the PlayStation 4, we have Until Dawn. And this right here is the best game in the whole collection. Until Dawn is sort of like, Heavy Rain, Beyond Two Souls, or Detroit Beyond Human, which we just saw at E3. Basically, it's an interactive slasher horror film where you're jumping from protagonist to protagonist to protagonist, and it stars a bunch of dumbass teenagers that are staying in the woods and just keep making the wrong choices, except you're making the choices for them. So you're making the wrong choices. It's pretty great. What's cool about this game is that you can actually save everyone or you can kill everyone, depending on how you play the story. And as it goes on, the characters actually get a little bit more real. You really learn to appreciate them. And if nothing else, I will say this is the perfect dating game. Like, get your significant other, give them over to your place or go over to their place and snuggle up nice and close, you know? And pass the controller back and forth and be like, oh no, and then start yelling at each other for making stupid mistakes because it was fucking obvious that you should not have run into the elevator. I'm sorry, just having a bad memory. Fuck you, Jessica. God damn it. Over on the PlayStation 3, Darkstalkers Resurrection. This is an awesome game. I know what you're thinking, like, Darkstalkers Resurrection, this is like an HD remake of Darkstalkers, right? No, actually, funny enough, it does not have Darkstalkers in it. It has all the Darkstalker games except for Darkstalkers. It has Night Warriors, which is part 2, and also has Darkstalkers 3 in their all HD glory. And I played those games back in the day. They were great. I have not played Darkstalkers Remastered or Resurrection, but I did look up some reviews on it, and apparently it was a really, really good port. So if you like fighting games, that's awesome. Also on the PlayStation 3 is Tokyo Jungle, and I will say this, if Until Dawn was not on this list, Tokyo Jungle will be the must-play game of the month. It is just this bizarre 3D side-scrolling beat-em-up where you play as different animals after the apocalypse. Like, you play as like a small dog and like, I think a raptor at one point, like a dinosaur. Like, you slowly go up the food chain. It's really stupid, but it's also really funny. Like, it's stupid in a really great way. And the fan base is really passionate for this game, and they've been begging for it to come to the PlayStation 4. If you want to know why, check it on your PlayStation 3 on July 4th. That's when these games are going to be going live. Also, the Vita. Of course, don't forget about the Vita. It's going to be getting Don't Die, Mr. Robot, which we talked about earlier, and a game called Elemental 4. Now, I'd never heard of Elemental 4 before, but this looks like an awesome puzzle platformer. You basically play as 4 different elements, like ice and bubbles, and you need to adapt to your surroundings to make yourself float or slide along the ground. It looks really simple, but really fun. I'm actually really interested in playing it. So all in all, for PlayStation Plus, really solid month. If you have all 3 consoles, man, it's an embarrassment of riches. But if you only have the PlayStation 4 or the Vita or the PlayStation 3, at least there's something for everyone. If you like fighting games or if you like, you know, interactive movies or little puzzle platformers. Lots of cool stuff out there. Anyway, toot toot. Now let's bounce over to Xbox to find out where the Xbox games with gold for the month of July. On the Xbox One, from July 1st to the 31st, you're going to get Grow Up. Now, this is the sequel to Grow Home, which was that Ubisoft game where you play as a robot who climbs up these large vines and makes them grow up. Oh, I'm sorry. If you can't tell, I really do not care for this series. I get that the controls are deliberately difficult, and that's fine, but the whole gameplay and just like the general world design, it did absolutely nothing for me. But I know other people that really liked Grow Home and Grow Up, so maybe check it out. July 16th through August 15th on the Xbox One, you'll get Runbow, which is a neat little platformer game where you and 3 other brothers are just running along dangerous landscapes. You're basically racing to get to the end of the stage, whoever gets in first place, second place, blah, blah, blah. But the cool thing is that the world keeps changing colors. And whenever the world changes colors, certain things in the background disappear and other things reappear. So let's say you're running along a yellow platform and then the world turns yellow. Basically, you would just fall because the platform is now part of the background. It's cool. It's really hard to explain. I remember that when it launched, there were some complaints over the online play. There was like a ton of lag, but that's when it launched. It's been more than a few months, so hopefully they fixed everything. Now, over on the Xbox 360, you've got Kane and Lynch 2 from July 1st to the 15th, and I'll be the first to admit, this is not a great game. It is a clunky third-person shooter that has odd movement and a bad cover system, but that being said, Kane and Lynch 2 looks awesome. It just looks awesome. It looks gritty and violent. Like, everything looks like it's being played on a cheap camcorder, like some circa 2007 Chinese knockoff camcorder, which has all this bad artifacting and the frame rate drops, but like, it's not dropping because the game isn't performing well. It's dropping because the camera is freaking out. It's hard to explain. If you've ever wanted to see what maybe a 3D Hotline Miami might look like, this is your game, and it has online co-op, so definitely check it out with a buddy. And lastly, we have Lego Pirates of the Caribbean. It's another Lego game. Who gives a shit? Anyway, July is alright for Xbox. Nothing that's must-play. Lots of interesting titles, though. Nothing must-play. I'm going to give it the nod to PlayStation this month. Xbox has been doing really well, but this month, man, PlayStation, you got Until Dawn. That's a really good lineup. Anyway, toot toot. Now let's give a quick rundown of the Xbox One backwards compatible games for the week. I know we're talking about a lot of games this week. We're talking about the SNES Classic, talking about the PlayStation Plus, talking about the Xbox Live. We're just going through games here. But here's a quick rundown of the backwards compatible games from 360 that have just been added to Xbox One. We're going to kick it off with Call of Duty Ghosts. Yes, really, they just added Call of Duty Ghosts. If you ask people what is the best Call of Duty game, there's a lot of discussion. Some people say, oh, it's Part 2. I love that World War II thing. Or other people are going to say it's Modern Warfare. Classic game. There's lots of Black Ops 2 fans, obviously. You know, so it's a pretty heated debate. But nobody says their favorite Call of Duty game is Call of Duty Ghosts because it is so fucking boring. It's so boring. So boring. But hey, if you want to relive that riveting campaign, go for it. Awesome. Up next, we have Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and I know a lot of Assassin's Creed fans that say that this is like the best Assassin's Creed game ever, because it basically is Part 2, but there's a lot more set-piece events, refined gameplay, and just the missions are a little bit more diverse, stories a little bit more cleaned up. And it's funny that Ubisoft even launched this, because they released the Ezio Trilogy, which is that HD remaster of Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations. I have no idea why they put this on backwards compatibility, but good on you, Ubisoft. That's awesome. Not just going for a quick buck. Up next, we have Wolf of the Battlefield Commando 3. This is basically a 3D version of Commando, the classic Capcom game. It's a pretty lackluster top-down shooter. I played it when it came out. It's not great. Then we have Radiant Silvergun, which is a fucking amazing top-down shooter that was launched on the Saturn and is now available on the 360 and now the Xbox One. If you can't get your hands on the Saturn version, you must play this version. It's so fucking good. Radiant Silvergun, you're basically a top-down shooter where you also have a sword. I know that sounds simple, but it's so good. And it was made by Treasure. Great developers. Up next, we have Blazing Angels, Squadrons of World War II. This is a fairly forgettable flight game with World War II planes, but I know lots of people that like those types of games, so cool. Awesome. Enjoy. And lastly, we have Cyber Troopers Virtual On OT, which is, of course, the classic Sega franchise, Virtual On. And I had no idea that this game even existed, and for good reason. It was never released in America. It was a Japanese exclusive, but I guess now you'll be able to buy it in the American store. Because it's a, universal compatibility for the Xbox One. So that's awesome. Big fan of that. Anyway, toot toot. It appears that the planned Mass Effect Andromeda story DLC may have been cancelled. Last week, Kotaku cited 3 separate sources saying production on additional content had been scrapped due to Andromeda's lukewarm reception. However, EA has disputed the claims. Speaking with GameSpot, a representative from Electronic Arts said that the rumors that Sinclair Networks was developing the DLC was a fabrication. Here's what he said, quote, or he or she, we don't know. It's just a representative. There's no gender there. Quote, we have never worked with Sinclair Networks, and they had nothing to do with the development of Mass Effect Andromeda. End quote. So there's a few reasons I totally believe that the DLC was canceled. But the only thing I can't figure out is when and where. That's my only issue. First of all, the story is coming from Kotaku. So even if you're like, oh, I don't like Kotaku, well, they have a track record of being right about these sorts of rumors, so I trust them. Second of all, this game launched without a season pass. In what world does a Mass Effect game launch? In what world does a BioWare game launch without a season pass? That just does not happen. So you know that there was something kind of up there. Third, EA already scaled down the team for Mass Effect Andromeda after it was released, and the rumor is that the entire franchise has been put on ice. What are you going to do? The one thing I just really can't figure out, though, is did this happen before or after the game was released? I know it sounds weird, but hear me out. EA is a pretty smart company, and they, even if you hate EA, they're a very smart company. And I wonder if they were just, like, maybe a bit worried about pushing out Andromeda. Like, they have internal reviews. They take people and have them write reviews inside of EA. They play the game, they write the review, and give them like an estimation of what they're working with. What's it going to be like when they put that game out? So when it gets a 71 on Metacritic, they're like, well, that matches our internal review systems. Movies does the exact same thing. Movies studios do the exact same thing. So maybe they took a wait and see approach. Like, are we going to go with this DLC or are we not? Or maybe the DLC was scrapped before launch because the internal reviews were lower than expected. As for the whole Sinclair comments, like, hey, we never worked with Sinclair, these rumors are not true. I assume that's just because the leakers of that information to Kotaku did not want to be caught. They did not want their background to be revealed, so they kind of threw in that extra thing that isn't true. That's sometimes what you do when you're dealing with a leaker. Either way, Mass Effect Andromeda, does it need DLC? No. Mass Effect Andromeda needs a lot more than DLC. And I know a lot of people will go online and be like, look at this animated GIF, the faces, they don't look right. Fuck that. The game just sucks. It was so fucking boring. So boring. Ugh. So no, I don't really care about the DLC. Anyway, toot toot. Last month, Sega launched its ambitious mobile platform, Sega Forever, where players could purchase classic Sega games for $2 or play them for free on their phone by watching short ads. However, the reception has been decidedly negative, with users complaining about unresponsive controls or poor audio emulation. Sitting down with Eurogamer, Mike Evans, the chief marketing officer for Sega Networks, is that really a thing? Whatever. He defended the program while also addressing many of the fan concerns. Here's what he said, quote, and I'm going to give him a funny voice. We've got a lot of things planned as we go through, and we're going to keep on working on that quality. For the vast majority of our fans, it's solid, but the specialist guys who are looking for absolute epitome of quality, well, we're just gonna have to keep improving for those guys. The launch itself has been really positive. If you look at the vast majority of feedback, it's been strong. If you look at the ratings on the App Store from consumers, there are definitely some good, very good sentiment as well. Is there room for improvement? Like anything, yeah, there is. End quote. Okay. You know, there's a lot to unpack here. Last week when we talked about Sega Forever, I was a little worried that I was being too much of a nitpicker. I was worried that I was, kind of just complaining a little bit too much about Sega Forever. But it appears I was not the only one. It appears that a lot of people are just like, no, this does not work the way it should. And I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see that more people were vocal about that, because you want it to be a better experience. And before anybody leaves a comment, yes, I'm aware that you could use a Bluetooth controller instead of the on-screen controls, so, you can't be mad at them for using, on-screen controls. That's a choice. But seriously, if Sega puts out a game, which they know the vast majority are going to be using touch controls, and they know that the touch controls do not work very well, why are they releasing it in the first place on a touchscreen? It doesn't make any sense, right? Maybe it's just me. As for the audio issues, those are just completely unacceptable. Like, Sega has been releasing these ports and micro consoles for years, and the audio is always shit. It's always shit. They never get the FM synthesizer right. And I know that's difficult to emulate, but others have done it in the past. Hell, there's MD.EMU, which is an application on Android phones which emulates the FM synthesizer pretty well, and that runs on phones, so why can't Sega do it directly? Or here's an idea. Sega, you have the hardware. I assume you have a Sega Genesis in the office. Sit down and actually import the audio directly. Like, play the game, do the stuff right there, and rip the audio, and then just place it directly onto the ROM file. I know it'll increase the size, but how big will the game be then? 30 megabytes as opposed to 6 megabytes? Woo. And I think the thing that's sort of missing the point here in this entire quote that was put out is that he keeps trying to put over the service, but not the games themselves. Like, we know these games play great, and we know they sound great, and that the service, Sega Forever, makes them not play great and not sound great. You don't need to be nostalgic to figure out that the things you're playing are some way compromised. You can tell that when they have the shape of the Sega Genesis controller on there that, this probably wasn't meant for a touchscreen. So hopefully Sega will figure that out. Hopefully. Toot toot. And finally on the hype train, Blizzard has finally announced the release date for the HD remaster of StarCraft, and that'll be out on August 15th for $15. No, it's not true. I just screwed up. It will be released on August 14th for $15. And that's really the whole story right there. Have fun, South Korea. I'm sure you're going to be very happy about that. Toot toot. All right. Let's get to the games that are going to be coming out this week. On Monday, we have nothing. Okay. But the games that are going to be coming out on Tuesday, we have nothing. On Wednesday, we have our first game of the week, at least in stores. Victor Vran Overkill Edition for the Xbox One. If that's your thing, go for it. On Thursday, Toby, The Secret Mine will be on the PlayStation 4. Toby, don't keep that mine a secret. Are you playing as the secret mine? Is the secret mine called Toby? Who knows? Also on Thursday on the 3DS, Kirby's Blowout Blast will be released. Nintendo has no idea what they're doing with Kirby. Just no idea. And then on Friday, Excel World vs. Sword Art Online Millennium Twilight will be on the PlayStation 4 and Vita. If you are a fan of anime, I assume that you've heard about this game. You might not even know this game is coming out. In fact, I had to do a bit of research just to figure out if it was in fact coming out or if it was some sort of error. What I've discovered is that it is a digital-only release. There's no price listed for this, which is bizarre, and the only information regarding its Western release is from a 2-month-old press release. So if you're into that type of anime stuff, check it out. I looked up a little bit of information. I guess it's good. If you like those Sword Art Online games, I might check it out. I might do that. Because, hey, I got an open mind. Boop, boop. That's going to do it for the hype train. Good old hype train. So, last week I put out the call saying, hey, tell me what you like about the PRESSURECAST. And so far, 2 people have answered. Only 2. But the responses were extremely helpful. You guys know who you are. Thank you very much. If you are listening to this, if you're at the halfway point of the show, that means that you like the PRESSURECAST, which is great. But maybe there's some things you don't like. Maybe you want to see some less and some more of different things. You know what I'm saying. So do me a favor. Email pressurecast@gmail.com, text or call 944-947-7377, tweet at VGADumb. Go to facebook.com/videogamesardumb. Let me know what you like or do you don't like, because I'm trying to get the numbers up on this. People that listen to it on the audio form, they really stick with the show. Video, not so much. But please, let me know what you like. Anyway, I think it's time to step outside. What do you guys say? I know a place that's always warm with the glow of cold, hard cash. That's right. It's time for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. Yes, the Chart Park. This is part of the show where we talk all about the money. Just the money, the business, and financial and legal news of the video game industry. And we find out which fat cats of Wall Street are going to tip their top hats towards Lady Luck. We're going to be starting off talking about Sony, which in a rare moment of self-awareness, Sony has actually pulled a game from the PlayStation Network. 5 stars, 1,000, top rated, that's the name of the game. It's essentially a picture-making game where photos are sliced up into 9 rectangles and then players put them in the right order. It's extremely simple. But Sony's decision to pull it had nothing to do with quality, but rather marketing, as Top Rated's commercial mostly focuses on the easy-to-gain trophies, the achievement system in the PlayStation Network, in case you don't know. Apparently, earning an elusive platinum trophy only takes about 20 minutes. How do I know this? Because it says it right in the commercial. Only takes 20 minutes, the easiest platinum in the world. Well, according to the creator on Facebook, who goes by the name Best PlayStation 4 Themes, we don't even know this guy's name, but alright, or her name. Anyway, quote, here's what they had to say. Quote, Sony has pulled the game temporarily and asked me to change the game's name and not mention trophies in the store trailer. I am happy to comply. I don't know when it will be released again, but I'll update this page as soon as I know. End quote. For what it's worth, Top Rated was priced at 98 cents, so basically it was just a cheap trophy. I have to say, I have no idea why Sony pulled this game down. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm really not. If you've ever been on PlayStation Network, you know, back when I used to do First Hour, where I would try and play everything on PlayStation Network, I would see dozens and dozens of just shit games, like below quality, just had no business being on a console at all. Not to mention just tons of themes and avatars. They're just overpriced, just crap. All of it was crap. Now, why Sony would overlook 4 years of just opening up the floodgates to any scammer out there to release some piece of shit for $10, why they would be okay with that, but not this, that's just extremely confusing to me, because they have absolutely no standards for their store page. But hey, if you want easy platinum, just wait for 5 stars Top Rated to return. Yeah. Moving on. We are no strangers to fan creations over here in the Chart Park. It seems like every single week there's a brand new love letter to a classic game, which is immediately shut down by the actual copyright holder. But in a rare move, it appears that we have a fan project that's been somewhat approved by the actual company that owns the rights to it. Installation 01 is a Halo game for the PC, which began production back in 2015? Okay, we'll go with that. Unlike fan projects, Installation 01 has been built completely from the ground up, and according to the real Halo studio, 343 Industries, it will be allowed to exist so long as the team keeps it non-commercial. According to the Installation 01 developers, they will not be able to accept donations nor sell merchandise based on this project, but the project's development will continue. Now, normally I would assume this has something to do with, the Xbox One not selling tremendously well, or the last Halo game not being very well received. Like they're just doing this as a goodwill gesture. But not really. This actually totally fits in line with 343 and Bungie's approach to fan projects. Ever since Halo launched in 2001, they've been very supportive of their fans creating things. Remember Red vs. Blue? Well, that's a fan project that eventually was embraced by Microsoft and Bungie. And they've always been just, they've been very supportive, and that's why their fans support them. That's why Halo still has a huge following all these years later. That said, it's worth pointing out that they could totally reverse this decision without hesitation for no reason whatsoever. In fact, I'm actually kind of surprised that they're even letting this project go on, because it kind of looks like they're not properly defending their property, which makes it difficult in a future legal case in case they want to be like, hey, you stole our stuff. That's going to be more difficult to convey to a judge or a jury if, if they're allowing this to happen. But I guess so long as Installation 01 does not sell their product, then it's all in the clear, which is cool. Awesome. Now let's get to the biggest story here in the chart park. This is something that I've wanted to do for a while. Last week, there was some really good news for Nintendo. The Switch had already sold 1 million units in Japan in just 17 weeks. How awesome is that? And now this places it just below the Wii in terms of speed, but well above the Wii U. So it is doing fantastic in Japan. It's not the fastest selling console ever in Japan, but in 17 weeks, it sold 1 million copies, which is awesome. Now, if you'll recall, we actually talked about this last week, right? But for some reason, Western outlets really didn't pick up on this until this week. And I don't really know why. Maybe it's because E3 finally wound down and the news cycle's kind of slowed up a bit, and they're just trying to find something to talk about. So they start talking about, wow, the Switch sold 1 million units in Japan. A 2-week-old story. Whatever. So why exactly am I talking about again? Well, I wanted to touch on some of the concerns and ideas that I've had about the Switch before it launched, and when I think about the console since it launched, specifically talking about the numbers. Because I feel like a lot of people are looking at these numbers, looking at these milestones, and they're walking away with the wrong perception. There's this view that this is somehow a magical moment. Like this is something we've never seen before. Oh my god! The Switch is breaking all sorts of boundaries. But it's not true. At all. And I want to be clear, I love the Nintendo Switch. I love playing the Nintendo Switch. But I think it's important to note that these news stories about the Switch, about how fast it's selling, about how much it's selling, all of these stories are based around very specific and very rigid qualifiers. For instance, I'm sure you've heard that the Switch is the fastest selling console by Nintendo. And that's true. That's actually true. It sold over 900,000 units in America alone within its first month. But let's really break that down. For starters, the Wii U was a complete bomb. So it's like, whoa, if the Switch is the fastest selling Nintendo console, big deal. The Wii U didn't sell that well. Well, how about the original Wii? Well, that was hit with notorious supply constraints. So of course, that's not going to be the fastest selling console. How about the Nintendo 64? Well, that sold 350,000 units within its first 4 days, but then it stalled for at least another 4 months because it took another 4 months to actually reach 500,000. So all the consoles before that, like the Super Nintendo and the NES, they are so old, it's just not worth comparing. So Nintendo being the fastest selling Nintendo console ever isn't really that big of a deal because unlike those other consoles, they launched worldwide within a 24-hour span. So of course it's the fastest selling Nintendo console. It's never been released so quickly, right? Right. Well, okay, let's talk about worldwide sales. How exactly did Nintendo do within that first 24 hours or that first month or whatever it may be? Well, In total, Nintendo sold 2.74 million units between March 3rd and March 31st. Basically, within 4 weeks, it sold 2.74 million units, which according to Wikipedia makes it the fastest selling console of all time. Except Wikipedia is fucking wrong. I have no idea why they just let anybody edit that. It's right on its front page. The Switch is the fastest selling console of all time. That's not true. In fact, finding exact numbers by date for this generation is incredibly difficult. But at best, we know for the fact that the Xbox One sold 1 million units within its first 24 hours. It sold 2 million within its first 18 days, and it sold 3 million within 5 weeks of its launch. Problem is, we don't know when it reached 3 million. Did it reach 3 million at week 4, or did it have to wait until week 5 to announce those numbers? We really don't know. But it's worth pointing out, that makes it the fastest selling Microsoft console of all time. Just saying. Similarly, the PlayStation 4 also sold 1 million units within its first 24 hours, 2.1 million units within its first 16 days, and 4.2 million units within a 6-week span. Now, once again, we have no specific sales to compare to the Nintendo Switch. If it reached 4.2 in 6 weeks and it reached 2.1 in 16 days, when did it go, reach 3 million? Was it within 3 weeks or 4 weeks? Because that would make it faster selling than the Switch. We really don't know. So we don't have real context for this story that we keep hearing over and over again. Oh, it's one of the fastest selling consoles ever. We don't know. We don't know. We can only compare it to those other two numbers. But even if we focus solely on the Japanese sales that were a huge deal this week, even though they happened 2 weeks ago, in terms of Nintendo, the Switch is basically in line with the Nintendo GameCube. Right now it's selling as fast as the Nintendo GameCube did back in 2002. And that's a console that sold so poorly, Nintendo actually pulled a Hail Mary and went to the Wii. They completely changed their business structure because of how poorly the GameCube sold. Now, it would be incredibly unfair of me to say, well, because the GameCube sold poorly, then I'm just going to assume that the Switch will sell poorly in the long run. That is unreasonable. But to assume these sales are communicating a direct trend for the near future is also irresponsible. So maybe, just maybe, if you look at all these numbers, we just really need to chill. Because I've been covering numbers every single week for years on the PRESSURECAST. Every single week for years. And, if the Xbox One is any indication, you never know how these sales are going to go long run. Big deal. I hear you say, big deal. I don't care about the numbers. I love the Nintendo Switch. I love playing all these games. I think the Switch is the best console ever. Well, first of all, congratulations. I'm always happy when people find a console that connects with them. That's fantastic to hear. Good on you. And I really like the Switch. I love the Switch. Go look at my reviews of Switch games. You're going to see that I really like the Switch. But I keep reading these stories about how the Switch is different. This is different for Nintendo. It's going to be a different company. There's going to be a strong lineup of exclusives coming in at a steady rate, unlike those long droughts from other consoles. Problem is, there's no evidence whatsoever of that. See, Nintendo isn't nearly as big as many people like to assume, and they certainly haven't gotten any bigger over the past 3 years. And yes, the current lineup is impressive. They had Zelda, they had ARMS, they had Mario Kart, Splatoon 2 is coming, Xenoblade is coming, Super Mario Odyssey is coming. Either those games are great or they look to be great. That's a fantastic first year. 2017 is going to be great for the Switch. But what exactly do they have coming down the line? A 2D Kirby game? A 2D Yoshi game? Metroid Prime logo? And I keep seeing these charts like, look at all these games that are going to be coming out. Well, yeah, a lot of games come out on consoles. Big deal. How many of these are great? How many of these are must own for this console? Now, look, I'm not trying to say they have to be instant classics, but I think that it's a bit exaggerated to say that, no, this is going to be different. There's no longer going to be droughts. It's going to be great game after great game. When I look at that list, when I look at, oh, we have Metroid Prime coming at some point. Here's just a logo, and here's some 2D Kirby and Yoshi games. To me, that shows a company that's running as fast as it can while running potentially thin. I don't think you're going to be getting your next Zelda adventure in the next 2 years. That's not going to happen. Same with Mario. In fact, I can only assume many of these projects have been in development for so long, they probably started off as 3DS or Wii U titles before switching over to the Nintendo Switch. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. Good on them. That's the right strategy to go with, because the 3DS is, it's waning and the Wii U is dead. They should be focusing only on the Switch. But to me, that doesn't say that they're going to continue this release cadence. It's not possible because it's just not big enough of a company. And, you know, as consoles shift from potential, oh, this is what Nintendo's going to be. And once they become reality, you know, instead of being like, oh my God, the Nintendo 64 is going to be the best system ever. And then by the second year, you're like, oh boy, there's not as many exclusives as I hoped there were going to be. Once that momentum slows down, consumer enthusiasm also slows down too. And if it, you know, if that happens, I think a lot of these projections that say, oh, you know, the Switch is going to be the next Wii, I think they're greatly overrated. So if that doesn't happen, if somehow the Switch continues to release a bunch of amazing games every single month and it keeps selling at this rate, I think that's great news, because the bigger the industry, the more jobs that are available, and the more people around the world that are going to be playing games. There's absolutely no downside to the Switch being hugely successful. I want it to be. But let's focus on the console that we have today and the data that we have access to right now, instead of creating this narrative through really specific qualifying statements, you know? It doesn't help anybody, and it has no bearing on reality. In other words, I can actually say that the Switch, right now, the Switch is doing as well as the Xbox One did when it launched. And it's doing just as well as the GameCube did when it launched in Japan. Oh, and it's also doing just as well as the PlayStation 4. That's all true. All of those statements are true, but if you know anything about the overall sales of the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and GameCube, you realize they have absolutely no relation to one another. The only way we're really going to know how the Switch does in the long run is simply by waiting for the long run to run out. And if you do enjoy Switch, I'm glad you do. Enjoy it. That's awesome. But let's just wait and see before we make some sort of grand statements about the future of this console. Okay? Okay. And that's not me being negative. That's me being cautiously optimistic. Okay. Moving on. It's been a while since we've heard about Ubisoft fending off Vivendi from a hostile takeover, but this week we finally saw a meaningful development. Reuters is reporting that Yves Guillemot, the CEO and chairman of Ubisoft, and his family have once again purchased more of their company's stock back. In total, the Guillemots now own 13.6% of Ubisoft with a 20.02% of voting rights. You know, they get to vote on what the company does. Now, this is in comparison to the giant conglomerate Vivendi, which apparently is trying to hostily take over the company. They own 27% of Ubisoft, and they have 24.5% of voting rights. Now, Ubisoft has seen recent fluctuations in their stock price, slipping in May before rising drastically during E3 in June. And you know, I gotta say, I'm a little bit worried, because this isn't the first time Yves and his brother have spent their own money buying back Ubisoft stock. In fact, last year they spent 122 million euros to purchase back stock in Ubisoft. And I'll admit it that this is a good follow-up for their strategy, but Vivendi is still their biggest stockholder, and a couple of months ago there were rumors that they'll be stepping up their game to own Ubisoft. Now, the thing is that the strategy that they're going, what Yves is trying to do is to own enough stock to prevent the hostile takeover in general, or at least to put the right people in positions to buy stock that will never sell to Vivendi, because Vivendi over the past few years has been buying stock at a higher value than it's worth, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. They just want to own Ubisoft. And yes, all credit to Yves. It's been 2 stressful years, and he's managed to just stick to his guns and fight back against this, but, you know, I'm not sure how long you can hold out. I really don't. And if you're listening to this or watching this, you're like, I don't care about Ubisoft. I really don't. Trust me. Trust me, you will care about Ubisoft once Vivendi takes over, because they are a very different company than Ubisoft. There is no way in hell Beyond Good and Evil 2 or Rayman Legends or all the weird experimental stuff would happen. You would just be getting Tom Clancy games every single month. And look at what Vivendi did when they took over Blizzard and Activision. Many people hate Activision to this day for making choices that weren't really their choices. It was Vivendi's choices. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. The UK retailer Game is preparing stockholders for a rough season. Last week, Game released a statement revealing that the predicted full-year profits would be, quote, substantially below previous expectations. In case you don't know, Game is basically the GameStop over in the UK. They're not the same company. I'm just saying that Game is basically like the UK version of GameStop. The company cited slow PlayStation 4 and Xbox One sales combined with the supply constraints of the Nintendo Switch as the reason for the decline. Game has had a turbulent past few years, voluntarily delisting itself from the London Stock Exchange in 2012 before rejoining in 2014. So, once again, if you're not from the UK, you probably don't think this story is a big deal. But for me personally, this is a fascinating company to watch. I've been watching them for years. Obviously, I've never been to a game store because I'm in America and they're over there in the UK. But seriously, Game, by all means, should stop existing. It should have shuttered its doors years ago, but somehow it survives. Like right now, their stock price right now is 24 pence. That's right, before the weekend, it dropped to 24 pence. And in fact, it dropped from 33 pence in just a day. That's almost a quarter of the value just dropped. By the way, in case you don't know, it takes 100 pence to make a pound, kind of like a dollar. And they haven't been over a pound for their stock price in over a year. I mean, there's a possibility they could bounce back. Probably not, but there's a possibility. I don't know, if you're over in the UK, let me know what you think about Game. Moving over, so why exactly are game stores failing in the UK? Why, it's digital purchases, of course, like PlayStation Network. But for some users, they're getting a little bit more than they bargained for. UK PSN users who purchase games through PayPal are randomly having their accounts banned due to a glitch in the PayPal system, triggering chargebacks. Those affected are somewhere in the range of thousands, though no numbers have specifically been given or discovered. But fortunately, the ban is only temporary because Sony has said they've already contacted the banned users. Long story short, PayPal had a glitch that basically did a chargeback after people had already purchased the game, which led PlayStation Network to be like, hey, you owe us cash, so instead they banned them. Now this right here is why I never, ever use a credit card or PayPal to buy anything off of PlayStation Network or Xbox Live or Nintendo or anywhere. Like if I see something I want on PlayStation Network, I will go out to a store and buy a PlayStation Network gift card before I will actually put a credit card in there, because I'm always paranoid that the numbers are going to get stolen or some stupid crap like this is going to happen. Actually, I will buy stuff online. I will go to Amazon and buy a PlayStation Network code because Amazon has such a good, success rate that they don't really mess up. Fun fact, actually, now that I'm on this topic about using gift cards, I do the exact same thing with like real stores. Like I remember when all those people were trying to buy Nintendo Switches, but they were getting chargebacks and their pre-orders were being canceled by GameStop and Best Buy and a bunch of other places, which was really, really shitty, because the servers were being overprocessed and they couldn't process the orders because they were trying to go and retrieve the information from banks, right? Well, whenever I buy a brand new console or when I know something's about to drop, like let's talk about the SNES Classic, if there's this particular store that is having pre-orders go up for that, I highly recommend you go out and buy whatever the value of the product is in terms of gift cards, plus tax, obviously, because when you put the money in there and then you purchase that at the store, it doesn't really need to process anything. It doesn't need to go to your bank and figure everything out. It's figuring it all out internally. You're not really doing anything. They already have your money. You're just pointing the direction where the money goes. And there's no way they're going to charge you back because who the fuck are they going to charge back? Themselves? That's just some advice. So that's how I got a Nintendo Switch. And that's how other people didn't. Just some advice for you. Cool. All right. Before we get to the charts, let's do a quick business news roundup. We're going to take all these smaller business news stories and we're going to run through them right now. Ralph Colantino, the founder of Arcane Studios, the developers behind Dishonored and Prey, has left the company. No reason was cited, though Colantino, whatever. Ralph. We're going to call him Ralph. Ralph said that he wished Bethesda, ZeniMax, and of course Arcane all the best, but he had no reason for leaving. He did not announce one. All right, moving over. Kate Edwards, the executive director of the Independent Game Developers Association, is stepping down from her role. Edwards helped to shepherd the company across the world, actually creating new chapters for independent game development, though she's probably best known for her clashes with the NRA and certain aggressive video game movements that I will not name. Edwards says her plan was always to leave after 3 to 5 years, so this departure fits within her goal. She's a really fascinating person. I'd recommend listening to some interviews with her. Moving over to Cast AR, the augmented reality company is no more. After 4 years, the studio is laying off 70 employees from internal development known as Eat, Sleep, Play. According to Polygon, the remaining group will sell off the technology of Cast AR as well as the rights before closing. Sad news. What are you going to do? There's just too many other big companies that are in augmented reality now. And lastly, Paradox Interactive has acquired Triumph Studios, the developers behind Overlords and Age of Wonders. According to Frederick Wester, who is the CEO of Paradox, quote, Triumph Studios is a developer after our own heart. They are world leading within their niche their niche and have built a large and dedicated community over the years, counting quite a few Paradox employees among their hardcore fans. Our main focus now is to ensure that they can continue to create their magic under new leadership." End quote. Sounds like they found a good company to buy them. Sounds like everything's going to work out. All right, now let's go over to the cursed land of tea and crumpets to find out where are the best-selling games in the UK for the week. We have our top 10 list. Here we go. Number 10 was Tekken 7, which is actually a pretty steep drop-off from 3 weeks ago. Number 9 was Forza Horizon 3. I don't know why that game is bumped back up. Number 8 is Horizon Zero Dawn. Number 7 is ARMS. Number 6 is Overwatch. Number 5 is Mario Kart 8. Number 4 is Ghost Recon Wildlands. Number 3 is FIFA 17. Number 2 is Dirt 4. And number 1 is Grand Theft Auto 5. God, didn't those guys get the memo? We're protesting Grand Theft Auto. How could that be the best-selling game in the UK? If you don't know what I'm talking about, just listen to last week's show. Now let's go to the cursed land of bullet trains, known as Japan, to find out what the 10 best-selling games and consoles over there. Starting off with number 10 on the PlayStation 4, God Wars Future Past. Number 9 was Ys 8, La Chromos of Dana on the PlayStation 4. Number 8 was God Wars Future Past on the PlayStation Vita. Number 7 was Monster Hunter Double Cross on the 3DS. Number 6 was The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch. Number 5 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Nintendo Switch. Number 4 was Farpoint on the PlayStation VR. That's pretty fascinating. Number 4 in Japan. Yeah, I understand those headsets are hard to come by over there. I mean, they are everywhere, but especially in Japan. Number 3 was the Alliance Alive on the 3DS. Number 2 was Final Fantasy 15 Stormblood on the PlayStation 4. And number 1 was ARMS. Awesome. ARMS is a good game. I liked it. Check out my review right now. But what were the best-selling consoles over in Japan? Well, I've got the list right here, so just relax. Starting out with the Nintendo Switch with 22,361, PlayStation 4 with 19,095, new 3DS LL with 11,474, PlayStation 4 Pro with 6,585, PlayStation Vita with 4,077, 2DS with 2,554. Nope, 45, not 54. New 3DS was 710, Xbox One with 265, PlayStation 3 with 201, and in last place, it's the Wii U with 150. The Xbox One is not in last place for the second week in a row. Congratulations, Xbox. You are turning the tide over there in Japan. I know you are. It's amazing. But that's going to have to do it for the Chart Park, the land where money grows on trees. All right, we've come to the final segment of the show, which of course is where we take a look back at the week that was 10 years ago and beyond to find if there's anything interesting that happened. It's a little something we like to call Strong History. Now this segment's going to be shorter than most of the other ones. It's summertime, so most games didn't get released in history. We have more summer games today than we did, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago. But there were a few that I thought were worth talking about. Starting it off with 12 years ago, this week, Killer 7 was launched on the GameCube, which just, man, Killer 7 is one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, I think about this game in terms of sound or story or anything at least once every single week, at least on a weekly basis. I want an HD remake. I want merchandise. I want to have a Killer 7 shirt. They don't make those, and it breaks my heart. I fucking love Killer 7. But to understand Killer 7, you actually have to understand the director of the game, Goichi Suda. Goichi? Whatever. People call him Suda51. That's what he's known as right now. And growing up, he was just a really weird guy, I guess you could say. He really liked pro wrestling, he really liked video games, and he worked a bunch of different odd jobs, including being an undertaker. Yes, you heard me right. He was an undertaker before cracking into video games. It's true. But his first projects were over at Human Entertainment with the world-renowned Fire Pro Wrestling series, a really fantastic series of wrestling games that never really gained any traction outside of Japan. Well, in Suda's second game ever, Super Fire Pro Wrestling Special, Suda wrote the game's scenario and story, which included an out-of-nowhere ending where the protagonist becomes the champion of wrestling. He realizes, though, deep down, even though he's got this belt, even though he's got all this acclaim, he's never going to be happy, so he goes home and he shoots himself in a wrestling game. That right there is where Suda became a big player within the industry. So, 4 years later, he starts his own company called Grasshopper Manufacture, and he begins writing, directing a series of visual novels, I guess you'd call them adventure games, such as The Silver Case, Flow, Sun and Rain, Flow, Flower, Sun, and Rain, not Flow, Sun, and Rain, and Michigan Report from Hell. Now, Michigan Report from Hell was released in Europe, making it the very first game released outside Japan, but Suda didn't know that. So when Capcom actually went to Grasshopper Manufacturer and asked them if they wanted to, make something for them, Suda knew that his game would likely be seen by a global audience and not just his Japanese fans. And so he began working on something called Killer 7, and it was made specifically to entertain and surprise a Western audience. And holy shit did it ever. Killer 7, in case you've never played it, is a on the rails, third person, adventure, survival horror, first person shooter with anime cutscenes. Yes, I think that's a good way to describe it. You play as 7 assassins, which are presumably all in the same body, and they're trying to stop Heaven Smile, which is a terrorist organization comprised of seemingly insane purple monsters who laugh and explode. Like at one point they blow up the UN. and you are these assassins, right? The assassins themselves are just as bonkers. You play as a grenade launching luchador, like a masked Mexican wrestler who has grenade launchers. You play as a woman who constantly slits her own wrists to uncover secret passages. You play as a man who can run as fast as the Flash. And just a bunch of really bizarre weirdos. People that put heads in guitar cases and make them come back to life. It's so weird. And if that's not crazy enough, it was developed as a Nintendo GameCube exclusive and part of the Capcom 5, though ultimately it would be released on the PlayStation 2. Now, sadly, despite being, a super fucking cool video game, it only sold around 240,000 copies, making it a complete flop. And yes, that includes the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 sales. But its vocal fan base pushed Suda as a visionary director. People said, this is the guy, we want more stuff from him. And Nintendo was impressed. So, he began working on No More Heroes, which is a series that I'm sure more people are familiar with. Now, Nintendo did not publish the game, or did they? They did not publish the game. Ubisoft? I believe Ubisoft published No More Heroes, at least here in the West. I don't know, but either way, when he released No More Heroes, his fan base was like, everyone needs to play this game, and it got enough attention, it became the best-selling Suda game ever. And he's certainly written and produced many other titles since releasing No More Heroes, but he hasn't directed a game in nearly a decade, which is really depressing. So if you get a chance, go out of your way, play Killer 7, presumably on July 7th when it was released, 7/7/17. I swear, you might regret it. I was going to say you won't regret it, but you might regret it. But I promise you, you will never forget it. It's super awesome. I love Killer 7. 14 years ago on the PlayStation 2, Charlie's Angels was released. Now this is cited as one of the worst games of its generation. It's a beat 'em up where you play as the Charlie's Angels and they're punching and kicking random bad guys while wearing bikinis. It is incredibly stupid and bad. But I was wondering, what exactly happened to the people that made this game? Where are they now? Well, the developer, Nico, is surprisingly still around and more prolific than they've ever been. They mostly publish independent games, and over the past 14 years, they basically have gone from making stupid beat-em-ups to brain teasers, 2D puzzle games, independent projects. Nico publishes a whole wide range of indie games like Replay, VHS Not Dead, 2 Pix the Cat. And all of those are available on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and PC. So they went from making really bad 3D games to publishing pretty cool 2D games. If you've been a PlayStation Plus subscriber for some time, I believe you have a copy of Pix the Cat. So give it a look. 15 years ago this week, Bruce Lee, Quest of the Dragon, was released on the original Xbox. So, 2001, I was probably at the height of my Bruce Lee fandom. I loved Bruce Lee. I loved listening to his interviews. I loved seeing those brief clips online where he's actually fighting someone for real. You never really get to see that. There's only like 2 pieces of footage where you actually see him let loose. I love watching his movies. Bruce Lee's just awesome. So when they announced they're making a Bruce Lee game out of nowhere, like just out of nowhere they're making a Bruce Lee game, I'm assuming it must be great. Like it must be a passion project. Why else would you make a Bruce Lee game unless there was tying into something? You're just making a Bruce Lee game? It has to be good, right? Why else would you bother? It wasn't. It wasn't good. It was a very bad game. Have you ever gotten motion sickness from a beat 'em up? Because I have, because I played this bullshit Bruce Lee game. Like the camera's just swimmy and it looks like a joke. You're just fighting randomly colored ninjas. It has no bearing on Bruce Lee or who he was or his philosophy or even his movies. Like, God, it sucked. So I'm like, all right, I see this is on the list. I'm like, well, what happened to Ronin Entertainment? I saw what happened to Neko or Nico. I'm like, all right, let's see what happened to Ronin Entertainment. Well, it's actually really difficult to tell what happened because the studio basically vanished once the founder, Ed Kilham, jumped ship to EA. So I went to their current website, or at least what's being claimed as Ronin Entertainment's current website, and it's just a series of cheap poker, blackjack, and gambling games. I was like, whoa, someone must have bought the name. This can't be the same studio. And then I noticed their logo, which was a young man, rather muscular, shirtless yet slim, appearing to be of some sort of Chinese descent, very reminiscent of one Bruce Lee, even the haircut. And the slogan was, "The Samurai of Casino Games with No Master." That's just sad. From bad to worse. And finally, this week in Strong History, 30 years ago, Leisure Suit Larry and the Land of the Lounge Lizards. Now, in case you don't know, sex in video games don't exactly mix as well as many would like. Either you end up with really awkward sex scenes from David Cage games, or you end up with simulated rape in Custer's Revenge. You really can't win when it comes to sex in video games. But back in 1987, Al Lowe and Ken Williams dreamed up the idea of Leisure Suit Larry. Well, that's not exactly how it happened. See, they were supposed to be working on a bunch of different Disney games, but for some reason, their latest Disney project fell through. And so these two guys had nothing to work on. They were over at Sierra Entertainment, the people that make all those adventure games. So they decided to remake the forgotten 1981 classic text adventure, soft porn adventure. Apparently, it's not much of an adventure, and there's not much soft porn. But anyway, Lowe, he enjoyed the puzzles in the game. He liked the structure. He liked the adult subject matter, but he knew that the game lacked character. So to make it a visual game, he decided to spice things up by creating a brand new character, a sad, middle-aged, horndog virgin named Leisure Suit Larry, a guy stuck in the 70s that's trying to get it on. Well, Sierra published the game. They went that far. They said, okay, we'll publish your game because you spent all this time on it. But they decided not to market it at all. At all. Because they're like, I don't think this is going to do so well. So Leisure Suit Larry is released, and it immediately flounders. It just doesn't move at all. There's no copies being sold. So, they kind of give up. They're like, well, that was a mistake. But slowly but surely, word of mouth starts spreading. People are talking about this weird sex game with this quirky sense of humor where you can die of an STD. So, what happened was, people actually picked up the game so much that it sold over 250,000 copies. Unfortunately, Leisure Suit Larry did not age too properly. I guess you could say that the game in general is a little non-PC, for lack of a better term. But what's even worse is that Leisure Suit Larry, despite being a really fun, quirky adventure game, when they released these sequels, Al Lowe wasn't really involved. And so they just started trying to make him a playboy. Leisure Suit Larry, he loves ladies. Look at him. Look at these ladies that love him. That kind of misses the whole point of the original, because he was a loser. That's why he wanted to win. You wanted to see the underdog rise to the occasion. But Leisure Suit Larry, the original game, well, that's a different story. People still respect it to this day, considering it one of the most important games of all time. In fact, Time Magazine put it in its top 100 best games ever. I'm not sure why it's on the list, but good on them. As for the creator of the series, Al Lowe, he's going to be turning 71 at the end of this month. So, happy birthday, Al Lowe. Thank you for Leisure Suit Larry. Maybe the franchise didn't work out so well, but the original game, that holds up pretty darn good. If you get a chance, I think you can actually buy a lot of the games on Steam today. So do that. But that's going to have to do it for Strong History. Good show. Anyway, this has been a long one, so I think it is time to close up the show. Remember, you can follow the PRESSURECAST on what? You can email the PRESSURECAST. I'm getting sleepy right here. I'm getting a little punchy. It's very hot in this room right now. I'm surrounded by lights and whatnot, if I'm being honest. You can email the PRESSURECAST, pressurecast@gmail.com. You can call or text 954-947-7377, or you can tweet at VGADumb on Twitter. Please do that. Or go to facebook.com/VGADumb. What's going to be coming up this week? Well, I'm going to have a video up about the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. If you're interested in my opinion on Cave Story Plus or ARMS on the Nintendo Switch, I highly recommend you go to youtube.com/videogamesardumb and watch my reviews and impression videos. They're really good. We're doing something slightly different with those. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. happy birthday, Allo, and happy birthday, Leisure Suit Larry. I guess he's 30 years old. He was like 40 years old in the original game, and now he's 30 years old. And sayonara to his virginity. Because he gets laid at the end of the game. But everything has to end, and that's okay. But the Pressure Cast will not, because the Pressure Cast is forever. Thank you for listening, guys.